Can Armenia and Azerbaijan finally reach a lasting peace settlement? Throughout 2024, there's been growing speculation that the two Caucasus countries may be on the verge of an historic deal. After many rounds of talks, this was highlighted when the two foreign ministers met on the sidelines of the July 2024 NATO summit in Washington and again pledged their commitment to a final agreement. However, while there may be good reasons to hope that Baku and Yerevan will reach a comprehensive settlement, many significant hurdles remain. So, just how likely is it that we'll see a final agreement, and will any deal bring lasting peace to the Caucasus? Hello and welcome. If you're new to the channel, my name is James Kerr-Lindsay, and here I take an informed look at international relations, conflict, security, and statehood. How much does leadership matter in peace processes? While we tend to think of conflict resolution in terms of high-level diplomatic negotiations between delegations, history has shown that major breakthroughs invariably come down to the decisions of a particular political leader. But no matter how much any individual may want peace, they almost always face stiff opposition, not only from the other side, but also from within their own country. One of the best examples in contemporary international relations is the peace process between Armenia and Azerbaijan. Following several conflicts that eventually saw Azerbaijan overrun Nagorno-Karabakh, the Armenian Prime Minister has put a comprehensive settlement with Azerbaijan at the top of his agenda. But while there are signs that the two countries could yet reach a historic agreement, significant hurdles nevertheless remain. Although the Armenians and Azeris have a long history, the roots of the modern conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan stretch back to the early 19th century when Imperial Russia began to consolidate its control in the South Caucasus. Following the Russian Revolution in 1917, Armenia, Azerbaijan and Georgia formed a short-lived union, the Transcaucasian Democratic Federative Republic. However, this soon broke apart, leaving Armenia and Azerbaijan as separate independent states until, in 1920, the Red Army seized control of both countries, bringing them within the newly established Soviet Union as the Armenian and Azerbaijani Soviet Socialist Republics. As part of this process, a mountainous area known as Nagorno-Karabakh, which was traditionally inhabited by ethnic Armenians, was granted self-rule within Azerbaijan as the Nagorno-Karabakh Autonomous Oblast. For the next 60 or so years, this arrangement remained intact. However, as the Soviet Union collapsed at the end of the 1980s, Nagorno-Karabakh requested that it be transferred to Armenia. While this was rejected and its autonomy revoked, as the USSR finally broke apart in 1991, the region seized the chance to declare independence. This sparked a bitter three-year war. However, by 1994, Armenian forces had gained the upper hand. In addition to securing control over Nagorno-Karabakh, they also seized many surrounding Azerbaijani districts, forcing hundreds of thousands of ethnic Azeris to flee. Although the UN Security Council recognised Azerbaijan's continuing sovereignty over Nagorno-Karabakh, successive international efforts to resolve the conflict over the following decades came to little. As a result, Azerbaijan used its significant Caspian oil and gas revenues to build up its military forces in preparation for a new war to retake the territory. This came to a head in September 2020 when Azerbaijan launched a full-scale attack. In addition to taking back the occupied surrounding districts, its forces also managed to seize parts of Nagorno-Karabakh. However, just as it appeared that they were about to overrun the region entirely, Russia brokered a ceasefire, leaving much of Nagorno-Karabakh under the continuing control of the local Armenian authorities. Following the 44-day war, peace talks began between the two leaders, Armenia's Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan and Azerbaijan's President Ilham Aliyev. However, an agreement remained out of reach. While Armenia wanted to discuss the final status of Nagorno-Karabakh, including self-rule, Azerbaijan refused to accept this. Insisting that the region couldn't have any special autonomy, it demanded that Armenia renounce all claims to the territory. It also wanted to discuss a transport link across Armenia to its western exclave of Nakhchivan. On top of this, there were also calls to reach a final agreement on their mutual border, which remained unresolved. As a result of this deadlock, tensions steadily grew again. This came to a head on the 12th of September 2022 when another major conflict erupted, this time along the border between Armenia and Azerbaijan proper. Although Russia again brokered a ceasefire and the US and EU pledged to redouble their efforts to find a settlement, the situation continued to deteriorate, especially as Baku then imposed a blockade on Nagorno-Karabakh in preparation for what many felt was going to be a final offensive. This eventually came a year later, on the 19th of September 2023, when Azerbaijan renewed its campaign to retake Nagorno-Karabakh. Crucially, however, Armenia refused to come to Nagorno-Karabakh's defence. As hard as it was for Armenians to bear, Pashinyan insisted that any intervention would only spark a catastrophic war with Azerbaijan, which could potentially lead to the loss of Armenian territory. As a result, Azerbaijani troops quickly overran Nagorno-Karabakh. As the last 100,000 or so Armenians fled, the local Armenian leadership surrendered. Within just 24 hours, Nagorno-Karabakh had fallen and was back under Baku's full control. Although the loss of Nagorno-Karabakh was a devastating defeat for Armenia, many feared that it wasn't the end of the story. There were concerns that Azerbaijan was now preparing another conflict, this time to take control of areas within Armenia that it contested, and perhaps even to force its way through to Nakhchivan. As a result, almost immediately, Pashinyan stepped up his calls for a comprehensive peace plan. In January 2024, he surprised observers by even suggesting a constitutional amendment removing any territorial claim to Nagorno-Karabakh, a suggestion that's now been enthusiastically taken up by Azerbaijan as a condition for a final deal. Since then, there's been limited but nevertheless important progress. In April 2024, the sides agreed to delimit part of their 1,000-kilometre or 600-mile border. This covered around 12 kilometres or 8 miles in the north. Controversially, this saw Armenia hand over 4 Azeri-inhabited villages to Azerbaijan, a move that sparked several days of protests in Armenia. However, since then, progress has been limited. As well as Nagorno-Karabakh and the border, any agreement must also focus on the land corridor, a key Azerbaijani demand. Meanwhile, Armenia will also want to tackle the question of prisoners of war and the repatriation of the remains of its dead soldiers. Nevertheless, Pashinyan has insisted that he remains committed to a comprehensive final settlement. But just what are the prospects for a deal? At this stage, the obvious focus is on Azerbaijan. While Baku insists that it is committed to an agreement, it's adopted a particularly tough position, maximising its demands. Of course, one could argue that as the victors, it can do this. Indeed, as observers have noted, any peace deal will essentially be written on Azerbaijan's terms. However, Baku can still overplay its hand. While Pashinyan certainly appears to want to reach a comprehensive peace deal, there will be limits. For example, despite having raised the possibility of a constitutional change over Karabakh, Pashinyan now seems to reject this. In this sense, a compromise will be needed, even if the overall agreement will be heavily skewed in Azerbaijan's favour. Offering Armenia a little dignity in defeat will likely make any settlement far more durable than one laced with uncompromising vindictiveness. But there have also been suggestions that Azerbaijan may not in fact want a deal. Specifically, the argument is that Azerbaijan's authoritarian leader needs the conflict for his future political survival. Having inherited his post from his late father, Aliyev has used the national quest to retake Karabakh from their historic Armenian foe as a rallying call for the nation to unite behind his leadership. A final peace would remove this. But regardless of what exactly drives Baku's position, many observers now argue that reaching an agreement will take significant outside pressure. However, as Azerbaijan mistrusts the EU and with growing tensions between Yerevan and Moscow, this would appear to fall on the United States. But until now, this seemed unlikely. With America caught up in the final stages of a presidential race, there appeared to be little political bandwidth for a significant initiative. However, President Biden's decision to withdraw from the campaign may perhaps have opened up an opportunity to work on this and contribute to his foreign policy legacy. An historic caucuses peace deal would certainly be a significant achievement. Alternatively, it could well be an early win for any new president. But aside from questions over Azerbaijan's commitment to a settlement, there are also issues concerning wider Armenian support for any potential deal. In addition to the April protests over the border agreement, there were further demonstrations over a potential deal in June. However, and interestingly, these soon fizzled out. This raises questions about just how opposed the public would really be to any settlement. Indeed, at this stage, many ordinary Armenians seem resigned to the fact that they'll have to accept a painful peace. As hard as it is to take, Armenia lost a war. That said, further protests can't be ruled out if or when a final proposal is put on the table. Either way, opposition is certainly likely to grow louder. The question is whether this will be enough to kill off any agreement. Meanwhile, another group to consider is the Armenian diaspora, traditionally an immensely influential voice in the country. Spread worldwide with significant numbers in France and the United States, they've often strongly supported the Armenian cause. However, as is usually the case with such groups, they tend to take a somewhat harder line position. Many will be deeply unhappy about any agreement that would cement the loss of Nagorno-Karabakh. But even if there is a final agreement, how durable will it be? In addition to inevitable worries that Baku could reignite tensions if the ruling regime comes under internal threat, there'll also be concerns about Armenia's future stance. While a settlement may be reached now, there'll inevitably be fears that a future nationalist government could renege on the arrangement and may again press its claims over Nagorno-Karabakh, perhaps even resorting to another war to try to retake it. While this is certainly possible and explains Baku's emphasis on a constitutional change to renounce Armenia's claims over Nagorno-Karabakh, it seems extremely unlikely, at least in the short or the medium term. Attempting to retake Nagorno-Karabakh would require a significant effort to build up Armenia's armed forces. This would ignite a costly and destructive arms race and may even run the risk of a preemptive attack by Azerbaijan and quite possibly Turkey. Instead, as in many other cases where a country has lost historic territory, the nation eventually moves on. While there'll always be a nationalist element that wants to reclaim what it sees as its rightful land, even if this takes decades or even centuries, most will see it as territory that'll never be realistically reclaimed. Armenia may never like the loss of Nagorno-Karabakh, but it will probably slowly learn to accept it. So far, Prime Minister Pashinyan's efforts to make peace have been met with widespread international praise. Having faced a monumental defeat, the foundations of which were laid long before he came to power in 2018, he's made genuine efforts to move on from the national disaster and forge a new relationship between Armenia and Azerbaijan. While many hope that his efforts to reach a settlement will ultimately bear fruit, and the signs still appear favourable, many factors still stand in the way. However, if a deal can be reached, it would be a huge achievement, and it would finally end at least one of the significant conflicts that have blighted the Caucasus since the collapse of the Soviet Union. I hope you found that useful. If so, here are some more videos that you might find interesting. Thanks so much for watching, and see you in the next video.